Hello once again, everybody, and thank you for joining me here on this special edition of Bang the Book Radio for Wednesday, July 31st. I'm your host, Adam Burke. Going to be joined today by Ross Tucker, former NFL player and the host of the Ross Tucker family of podcasts. Lots of great NFL content out there from Ross on a weekly basis. Very lucky to have him here on the program to chat a little bit about the NFL preseason and also take a look at some season win total thoughts as we head on in to the 2019 NFL campaign, which is not that far away here, and obviously the preseason starting on Thursday night with the Hall of Fame game. If you've missed anything here on Bang the Book Radio this week or over the last few weeks, a lot of great stuff, lots of college football content. We talked a little bit of NFL yesterday with Brian Leonard of WagerTalk.com. We'll do some more NFL here today with Ross, but we've done college football stuff with Brad Powers, with Rolf Michaels, with Lockie Lockerson. Some very good stuff for you to check out there. Also, trade deadline today. The Bettor's Box comes your way again tomorrow. I'll give you some thoughts on all of the transactions that take place. Talked a little bit about the trade deadline and some of the games here this week on Monday's edition of the Bettor's Box as well. So if you missed that, still some shelf life for that, but obviously lots of moving parts here in the Major League Baseball world. I'll recap all of those deals with you on Thursday. Then on Friday, Christian Pino will join us from the Sports Gambling Podcast to chat some UFC with us with another UFC event here this weekend. As you know, this and every edition of Bang the Book Radio presented by our friends over at DSI Sportsbook. BTB, the number 200 is that promo code. 100% deposit match bonus for the Sportsbook. 100% deposit match bonus for the live casino at BetDSI. It's only a game until you bet it. Not only can you use the stuff here on Bang the Book Radio for help with your bets, but also lots of great content over at bangthebook.com as well. James Mazzola with an excellent preview here of this weekend's Wyndham Championship, my daily MLB picks and tips piece, rolling out a bunch of college football season win total stuff today, divisions for the Power 5, full conferences for the Group of 5. Got all of those in here from our very talented cast of writers. We'll be posting those up here this afternoon over at bangthebook.com. So lots of stuff to help you out with college football. We've got golf, WNBA, Canadian Football League, Major League Baseball on the daily. Tons of stuff going on over at bangthebook.com. So please make sure that you check it all out. All right, with that, we go ahead and bring on today's guest. That is Ross Tucker, former NFL player and from the Ross Tucker family of podcasts. Ross, how's it going today, man?
Adam, I am fantastic, buddy. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, man. Appreciate the time. Thank you so much for joining me here. And, you know, I know that you've got a lot of stuff going on here. Your post-playing career has been very, very busy on the media side. A lot of players do go from playing to the media side, but one of the things that I kind of want to, talk with you about a little bit here before we get into our talking points, what sort of made you gravitate towards the gambling side of football?
So it's interesting, just to give you the background, my dad's 5'9", 170 pounds. So I kind of always wanted to be a broadcaster, and then I just became a lot bigger and better at football than I ever thought I would be. So I never really thought I'd be good enough to play in the NFL for 7 years. So sometimes I think God made me good enough as a player so I could fulfill my dream of being a broadcaster, which is kind of funny. And then, I get a chance at ESPN to do a podcast. I didn't even know what it was. But I did it for 3 years. I just said, yes, you're going to pay me to talk about football? Okay. I literally did not even know. I went out on my own with the Rocker Football Podcast. And after a year, I just realized, everybody loves fantasy football. I got to add a fantasy football podcast. So I did that. And then after that year, I just thought, the other thing everybody's always talking to me about, everybody's always asking me about fantasy dudes, and they're all also asking me about betting. So then I added the Even Money podcast with Steve Fezzik, who's the only two-time winner of the Westgate Super Contest, and he hopped on with me there. And I've just really, really enjoyed learning more about sports betting and trying to provide value to the listeners. We've had a pretty darn good run. Last year I was a little bit down, but every year before that I was in the black. In 2017 I was in the black by a lot. So it's been fun, it's been challenging, it's been a learning experience, but it's been great.
One of the things that we've talked about a lot here on this show is, legalization and the impact of that. Have you seen an uptick in, listenership for the show or interest for the show as, more states have kind of embraced sports betting and really as the leagues have embraced sports betting as well?
Without question. I mean, you're talking to a guy who lives in southeastern Pennsylvania, so with New Jersey going live and now Pennsylvania going live, especially where I live, it's been a big deal. New Jersey has just been huge for people. I mean, huge. And I'm hoping Pennsylvania follows suit and it becomes that popular. And then as more and more states get on board, I think this is a train that's just going to keep on rolling. And yes, the Even Money podcast listenership has definitely gone up as a result.
Well, we'll give you a chance to talk a little bit more about the Even Money podcast and the other shows that you have at the tail end of the segment here today. But as I mentioned in the intro, Ross, NFL preseason starts on Thursday night. The Hall of Fame game, Falcons taking on the Broncos in Canton, Ohio. Obviously, this week 0 game, a little bit different from the rest of the weeks of the preseason. But you played, you went through all the practices, the camps, obviously the preseason games as well. Can you shed some light for our listeners here on what they may want to be looking for when handicapping these exhibition games?
Yeah, it's funny too, Adam, because this week on the Even Money podcast, we literally went over our 4 tips for winning with preseason football and betting preseason football with myself and Steve. So these are top of mind for me. And really, I had sort of the same thoughts that he had. The number one is understanding the spot. It's very different from regular season football when the known objective of everybody involved is to win every game. That is not the objective necessarily in preseason football. We also have some coaches, it's a higher priority to play their starters, get them ready for the year. Some coaches, it's a higher priority to go ahead and just rest guys. You can also look and see what teams are doing in terms of their preseason record. In other words, if you're an 0-2 preseason team and you have a first-year head coach, he really does not want to go 0 in the preseason. So he's going to probably put a lot more effort into that third preseason game, getting a win under his belt. And I'd say in general, first-year head coaches want to win a couple games in the preseason just to kind of try to establish a culture and have the guys have that winning feeling. So that's something that's really important to note. So even like for the Broncos and the Falcons, you got to think for Vic Fangio that it's more important to him than it is to Dan Quinn and the Falcons, which is probably one of the reasons why the line has moved the way it is. And that actually leads me to my second tip, which is just coaching tendencies. Falcons have not won very many preseason games under Dan Quinn. If you go back to like when Tony Dungy and Jim Caldwell were with the Colts and Bill Polian, they like never won preseason games. It just was not a priority for them. So that's something else to keep in mind. You know, keep those coaching tendencies in mind for how they typically play the preseason because it matters. So those are the 2 big tips in terms of the spot and coaching tendencies. After that, you really want to look at backup quarterbacks and how good the backup quarterbacks are for these teams because they're the ones that play the lion's share of the game. And just like regular season football with the starters, preseason football with the backup quarterbacks, they're the ones that have the biggest impact on winning and losing. And then the last one is to believe the line movement. I mean, usually when the lines move, it's because new information has come out regarding who's going to play, how much they're going to play. And so, you know, if that line's moving quite a bit, there's usually a reason for it. So unlike the regular season where maybe you can fade those line moves a little bit, in the preseason, it's usually there for a reason.
Something I want to ask you about here with regards to the spot, something I kind of thought about. I'm a big baseball guy, and you know a lot of people do very well betting spring training baseball. I don't dabble in it too much, but a lot of times with some of those longer trips, some of those longer bus trips, the veteran guys won't go to those games. So is travel a factor in the preseason too, where you know, if you've got a longer trip, maybe some of the veterans kind of aren't as invested or aren't as engaged, or are they just happy to try and get back into the rhythm of being out on the road with the boys again?
No, I don't really think that's a factor in the NFL. I mean, it's only 2 preseason games, and usually they try to make preseason games close. Like the Eagles, I'll be their television color commentator for the preseason, and they play like the Ravens, the Jets. So a lot of times the travel is not significant, and really it's more to do with the coach's preference for the starters' playing time than anything else. So I wouldn't suggest travel's much of an issue at that level.
One other thing I want to ask you about here with regards to the preseason, in terms of the backup quarterbacks, obviously if you've got a veteran guy, he knows what to do, but a lot of times these games are decided by, first-year guys out of college or maybe second-year guys that are trying to graduate to that backup quarterback position. How should we, interpret those guys? I mean, will the coaches simplify things for them early on as much as possible? Will it be a very vanilla type of playbook?
Usually, yes. They want to try to put those guys in a position to succeed. And I can speak from experience on this, Adam. The quality of the backup offensive line has a lot to do with it. I mean, a lot to do with it. So I think that's an important factor for sure, is the backup offensive lineman. But yes, I don't think that, it's funny, they really don't want to put too much on the young quarterback's plate, no matter who they are, right? I mean, they're trying to keep things simple for them and give them a chance to just go out there and play. I don't knock a guy too much if he doesn't play great in the preseason when they're a young guy, but the reverse is true, whereas if a guy ends up playing really well, like a Russell Wilson, I absolutely take note of that, because if a guy as a rookie steps in there and really is performing well, that's usually a really good sign.
All right, so transitioning away from the preseason here a little bit, one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because I think this is fascinating, when you talk about the NFL and you talk about the level of parity year in and year out here, obviously you've got your dynasty level teams and your really, really strong teams, but 8 of the last 9 years, a team has gone from worst to first in its division. And as we look through at last year's bottom feeders, some of these teams really, really bad for a variety of different reasons, injuries, bad quarterback play, whatever the case may be. I want to say that this stat is maybe something like 12 of the last 15 or 13 of the last 15 years this has happened. Do you see any team this year capable of going from worst to first in its division?
There's really only one. And look, I know stuff happens, but you look at some of these teams, Arizona Cardinals and, the New York Giants. I mean, it's just not happening. I'm sorry. The one team that stood out to me that I do think has a chance would be the Jacksonville Jaguars. I am still concerned about the Houston Texans offensive line. They didn't really get any better there. The Colts, this Andrew Luck thing is pretty interesting and something to keep an eye on, certainly. And then, the Titans, I don't really see them doing much. The Jags have a lot of talent. There's a reason why they had the lead in the fourth quarter of the AFC Championship game a couple years ago. And now they have Nick Foles, who has proven himself, and he's got that playoff pedigree. So I would say I think the Jacksonville Jaguars have the best chance to go from worst to first.
So Foles is that guy. I mean, you said you're a Southeast PA guy. Obviously, you follow the NFL as a whole, and you do a great job with all the different shows that you have in your different media appearances. But obviously, you're kind of inundated there with some of that Eagles coverage. Nick Foles, is this the missing piece for Jacksonville then?
I think he's a very solid quarterback, and that he will be a significant upgrade over Blake Bortles. And you know the way it is, there's not that much of a difference between a lot of these teams. And so if he can just be the difference in why they win a game or two more, and Bortles was why they lost a game or two, then you've really got something there. I think Nick's going to play well, but again, he's not playing behind that Eagles offensive line. He doesn't have necessarily Alshon Jeffrey and Zach Ertz. It's a new system. We'll see whether or not, DeFilippo should know how to maximize his skill set, which would be a real good sign.
All right, speaking of regional coverage here, I'm a Northeast Ohio guy, Cleveland native. The hype train about the Cleveland Browns is remarkable. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. And look, this city deserves it. And quite frankly, the Browns haven't won the division title in 30 years, and they were favored to do it most of the summer here and are probably still the favorite in a lot of people's minds. But as we look at some of your favorite AFC win total picks here, you've got some skepticism about the Browns.
So, look, I think the Browns are going to be in the mix with the Steelers and the Ravens to win the division. I think, though, some of these Super Bowl odds, some of these win totals, I think they've gotten a little bit out of hand for a team that this is the first time they have been the hunted rather than the hunter. There's a big, big difference. They've got a first-time head coach. They swapped out defensive coordinators. That's just a lot of change. And there's also, the potential there with some of those personalities for things to get a little bit dicey if things don't get off to a fast start. I think that there will be somewhere in that 8 to 10 win range, somewhere in that group. I just think it's much more likely that they're at 8 than it is that they get to 10 in that division against Pittsburgh, against Baltimore. So if their win total is going to be 9, I'm going to go under 9. I don't really see them getting to 10. I think the Browns, if they win 9 games, that's a good year. I think that there's more of a chance that they're at 8 or 7 than there is that they get to 10. So I'll take the under for the Browns.
And definitely important for our listeners to shop around for the different odds out there. Some places you can get 9.5 with reasonable juice. Some places 9 with pretty reasonable juice as well. And you mentioned them maybe not getting off to a great start. The early schedule is a big, big challenge for them. So, again, this is a team that could be chasing that season win total most of the year. But as you mentioned, the Browns, Steelers, and Ravens probably going to jockey for position here in this division. So feels like there's a correlation between that and your thoughts on the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, I'm taking the under 6 on the Bengals, too. And I know 6 is a low number. I get it. But they're already without their 2 best offensive linemen that they were counting on this year. Jonah Williams, Clint Bowling, they're out for the year. We know now already A.J. Green's going to miss some games. That's a lot, man. Your 2 best offensive linemen and arguably the team's best player is going to miss a few games. How productive is he when he comes back? It's a new offensive system that he's not going to be able to practice in at all. I think the Bengals are looking at a 4 or 5 win season. I don't think they get to 7. Maybe they get to 6, but not 7. Give me the under on the Bengals as well.
Well, and as a player, I'm sure you experienced this. There are questions about Andy Dalton. There are contract things where they don't have to worry about guaranteeing him too much. That's kind of a black cloud that looms over the team all year long, and that can kind of throw some things out of whack as well.
Yeah, look, especially if they start poorly, then that becomes more of a conversation. But I don't think that Andy strikes me as the guy that would be a big distraction for him. I think that he'll be okay in that regard.
All right, so as we transition over to the NFC here, look at a couple of win totals for you. Once again, coming from the same division here, we'll start with a team that you don't really have very high hopes for in the NFC East in the Washington Redskins.
A lot of bad signs already. Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with Trent Williams. My guess is they go with Haskins at quarterback. Geis is a little bit banged up. They don't really have weapons on the outside. I just don't think they get to 7. I mean, they might, but they're, I think the Eagles and Cowboys are both really good. And I think there's going to be some growing pains on a young quarterback who only played 1 year of college football. And as a result, I kind of like the Redskins under 6.5.
So as we look here in the NFC East, it seems like there's kind of a discussion. The Giants probably not going to get there with Eli, and we'll see how much Daniel Jones plays this year. It looks like the winner of this division comes down to Dallas and Philadelphia, and there is a season win total between those two teams that you do like.
Yeah, I'm going to go over 9 for the Cowboys. They've got a very talented roster, a very young roster. You know, they had some issues last year, and they still got, 9 wins and won the division. Now they've got Travis Frederick, their all-pro center, coming back. I'd be really surprised if they didn't win at least 9 games. Really surprised. And think they have a great chance to be at 10, 11, or 12.
Ross Tucker, who's work you can find over at rosstucker.com. Full list of podcasts for you over there. Fill our listeners in on what they can expect to hear.
Yeah, so Ross Tucker Football Podcast is daily, your 30-minute update on what's going on in the NFL from a former player's perspective. Fantasy Feast with Evan Silva is, I think, the best fantasy analyst out there. We're doing our tiers of Evan right now, which is really important to know and have context for the tiers in which these positional guys are ranked. And then we mentioned Even Money with Steve Fezzik. I got the college draft, where we break down the top college prospects if you're into that. And then a bunch of other ones, man. College Football Bros, I'm not on that one. Fantasy Football, the Ball Blast 'em ladies, they're awesome. So it's you can check it all out at rosstucker.com. Very proud of the entire network.
Well, definitely make sure as well that you follow Ross on Twitter at RossTuckerNFL. Ross, appreciate the time, man. This has been a whole lot of fun. Great to chat with you. Thanks for reaching out, and hopefully we'll get you on the show here again soon.
Absolutely, Adam. My pleasure. Keep up the great work, and thanks for having me.
There you go. There's Ross Tucker, former NFL player, now media, speaking, entrepreneur, and that Ross Tucker family of podcasts. Lots of great stuff for you to check out there. Again, make sure you follow him on Twitter at RossTuckerNFL. Coming up on Thursday, we'll have a new edition of the Bettor's Box, my MLB betting podcast. And then Friday, we'll chat with Christian Pina about this weekend's UFC event. Lots of great stuff going on over at bangthebook.com as well that I highly encourage you to check out. So that'll do it for me. Thank you so much for listening, everybody, and I will talk to you again tomorrow.